You're listening to the Business Communicators.
The U.S. Labor Board, if you're not familiar, accused Google of spying on employees and discouraging unions and perhaps even retaliation. So the U.S. National Labor Relations Board filed a complaint against Google last week, alleging that the company illegally terminated and surveilled its employees. And the agency also accused the company of illegally blocking employees from sharing work grievances and information with each other using, tools like calendars, email, meeting rooms, and just internal comms that Google calls meme gen. This is a little bit concerning because I feel, especially in 2020, it's so important for us to have that water cooler talk and to be able to share what's going on, to be able to develop those relationships with your coworkers and colleagues, because we can't do that in person now. And I find this a little bit alarming if the allegations are true.
I have no doubt that they're probably some sort of facet true, because every company I've ever worked for, when I'm given the company phone or the company computer, you sign a thing saying, we can monitor your stuff and we can do this and we can do X, Y, Z. And to think that they're tracking it or not tracking it is insane. But to your point, Austin, there has to be some sort of personality stuff that comes from it. And we've talked on this podcast about the cancel culture, but at the same token, one comment, one sentence could be completely taken out of proportion. And so at what point in time do we have that personalized thing? And the other challenge that comes into play is the other breaking news from this week is Salesforce is buying Slack, which is an internal comms group as well. And Salesforce is a CRM system that collects information on everybody. So now if you're using Slack at your office, you're now being tracked on your CRM as well. I know it's happening. I'm disheartening that it's happening because I think of some of the reasons why they're doing it.
Well, you're going to have to be upfront when you're working with employees to let them know exactly what it is you expect of them when you are, whether you're exchanging information. And as I was reading it, you're firing people for email, but you didn't say what exactly the context of that email. So we don't know exactly what this is really all about. So until we know that, I mean, we're just going by what's put in the media. So, but I think for me though, Google that just gives them so much power. And should anybody have that much power over their employees? That's the question for me.
I do think it's interesting because CNBC actually, in their article on Google, they said that this comes on the heels of the major $310 million Google settlement to Alphabet shareholder lawsuit, which alleged that the company had mishandled claims of sexual misconduct by executives there. So it's just, you've got that going on, and then you've got potential spying on employees. And I mean, I totally get the concept of, making sure that your employees are doing work and being effective, especially as we're, maybe facing this agile work environment. We're starting to get used to it. Maybe productivity has changed, maybe it hasn't. And it's something that we're going to have to do at least into 2021, maybe a little bit further as companies decide to shift the way they do business. But I don't know, are there other things to be concerned about here?
Yeah,
I think trust is a big one. And with the labor board being the one who's filing these complaints and grievances makes me go towards that. Are they talking unions? Because if you look at the history of unions, it's when there's starting to be a disproportionate requirements to the workers, to the managers. And in the news, you see the pay disparity. CEOs are making 147 times what the average worker is, or whatever it is. I'm making it up there. And we live in a right to work state, which, has its pros and cons. But then you also look at the labor complaints coming from the airlines industry or the auto workers. And so I think there's a lot more to the story than what we're seeing now, especially with the person who's filing the complaint.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hattie, you mentioned trust, and, you're an internal comms expert, and you've dealt with, I think you have a good pulse on, the different businesses that you work with and the people that work within that business. Why is trust something that you cannot sacrifice in order to keep morale high for employees?
Well, the one thing about trust is that when you're working with leaders, is because you don't want to breach that. They're not going to give you good information, or they're not going to want to work with you, and you're not going to know what's going on within that business to be able to even communicate. So the whole idea of working with individuals, whether you're working with teams, is that they need to be able to know that you're going to have their best interest at heart, that they are conveying to you, that they can trust you to create or to write that information in a way that is going to position them in a positive way or what have you. But breaching trust when you spy on me, or you don't tell me anything, or you go around me, or you undermined me, that is something that you really need to, you have to take into consideration of what you want from that individual. So yeah, it's important for me to be able to work with people who trust me, to know that I'm going to do a job that is in their best interest the right way, but even as on behalf of their business.
It's interesting we mentioned this in working from home, that with the whole COVID thing, the amount of people signing up for trackers on personal computers, whether it's productivity trackers, et cetera. Microsoft 360 today just came out saying that they're going to reword some of their productivity monitors about how many emails do you reply back to, who's doing those kind of things. That was this morning's news. And I'm going to try to find the statistic as we go through this conversation, but it's just interesting. You mentioned trust, but yet how much trust is there really? Is it trust what's coming out of my mouth or trust my actions?
That's
Both.
that's a very good point. And I think trust is so crucial for company success. If the leaders don't trust its employees, they're going to fail. If the employees don't trust the leaders, it's going to fail. But Google and Alphabet, its parent company, are so big. Does trust even matter for an organization that size? I mean, because we all know that Google has so much data and information on us based on what we use Google for, to search for different items. They know our sales habits, they know our email habits, they have all of this information. For these massive companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, does trust even matter?
No. But the one thing I would assume is companies like Facebook, Google, all of the big ones that you mentioned, I'm going to assume that they have their employees sign non-disclosure agreements, all kinds of how they exchange information or how they don't exchange information. And I don't want to say, and use that and make sure, to understand how that information is used. And if you breach that trust or that non-disclosure agreement, you're automatically out the door. So with companies that huge, it's hard to know sometimes who to trust. You're hiring people to do a certain type of job, whether they're home or whether they're in the office, but how do you know that they're getting that job done, or how they're getting that job done in a ethical or honest way or approach? You don't. So that's a huge question, and that could turns even into a bigger concern.
So it was an NPR article that I was quoting earlier. So I found it real quickly from May 13th, talking about the rise of the spyware on the at-home employee. And I worked in healthcare where I had to sign HIPAA compliances. And then you have all these other things. And when you say signing these NDAs, who's the NDA really for? Is it for the company to make money, or is it for the company to find a reason for you to be shown the door if needs be? And you read some of these NDAs, there's some pretty hefty fines, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years down the road, that if you talk about any sort of new technology that you're using at your company. Yeah, it's a scary world at how much information we collect and have access to.
But think about celebrities. They have people who work for them sign NDAs all the time because they don't want their privacy out there in the opening. People could take pictures, they could use information and sell it. So, as you say, for a company, who is this for? Is it for them to make money? Of course it is. They don't want their company secrets walking out the door so that someone else can mirror exactly what they're doing and ripping them off. It's an iffy situation there.
A necessary evil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing business.
I hope that we get to the level where we can all sign NDAs for the Business Communicators podcast and for guests that we have. That is the dream for the podcast. I will just say that. But I do think it's going to be interesting to follow. The labor board said that they expect an answer from Google by December 16th. And the agency said that they're going to have a hearing on April 12th, 2021 in San Francisco. So that's something that we will definitely follow here on the Business Communicators as we move into 2021.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.